And so I was so traumatized by just being in front of arguably the greatest American director in history.
He doesn't audition stars, he doesn't gamble on charisma. Spielberg watches, then chooses. And once someone enters his orbit, they rarely leave.
Without giving him the credit for what he was actually trying to tell me.
Across 5 decades, Spielberg has redefined how emotion moves through film, how faces carry stories, and how silence says everything. But behind every masterpiece, there's one decision that matters more than all the rest. The actor in the frame. The ones he calls back. The ones he lets lead. The ones who don't just perform, but change the shape of the story. He doesn't cast stars, he casts resonance. Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, Lincoln, Catch Me If You Can. The camera moves, the plot turns. But the gravity? That's human. Spielberg finds the still point in the chaos, and it always starts with the right face. And when he gets that right, the work disappears. What's left feels like memory, something lived, not performed.
And he had a great old Hollywood idea. He said, why don't we use a real shark?
Over hundreds of cast members, only a handful made his world feel real, the ones he trusted fully and never had to ask twice. Here are the 12 actors Spielberg holds above the noise, above the credits, above time. Make sure to watch till the end, because the last one on this list, Spielberg will never forget this cooperation. Number 1. Tom Hanks. Some actors impress. Tom Hanks anchored. From the moment he stepped into Saving Private Ryan, Spielberg didn't just see an actor, he saw a mirror. The way Hanks moved, listened, breathed, every beat lined up with the rhythm Spielberg needed. And over 5 films together, that rhythm never broke. Hanks once said, "When Steven calls, I don't ask questions, I just say yes." That's not loyalty, it's instinct. For more than 25 years, Hanks has been Spielberg's go-to for moral complexity, emotional weight, and quiet power. He doesn't raise his voice, he steadies the frame. On the Saving Private Ryan set, Spielberg barely gave direction. Just a look, a whisper, that was enough. Hanks knew where the soul of the scene was, and he found it without noise. Later, in the post, Hanks transformed into Ben Bradlee. Spielberg said, "It was like watching a journalistic lion step into the newsroom. No ego, no flash, just total command. Their bond doesn't need celebration. No social media praise, no awards speeches, just pure repetition of trust." Hanks doesn't perform for Spielberg, he protects his stories, gives them gravity, breathes restraint into chaos. And Spielberg, he gives him legacy. This isn't just collaboration, it's something closer to creative telepathy. It began quietly, and never had to be spoken again. Number 2. Harrison Ford. Some actors play the role. Harrison Ford becomes the reason the role exists. For Spielberg, Ford wasn't just Indiana Jones. He was the spine of an era, an anchor made of grit, humor, and silence. Their first collaboration in Raiders of the Lost Ark didn't just launch a franchise, it redefined the action hero. Ford wasn't cast for flash, he was cast for instinct. Spielberg once said, "Harrison brings confidence into a room, and when the camera rolls, that confidence becomes myth." That's not hyperbole, it's history. On set, Ford didn't ask for special treatment. He didn't flinch at stunts. During The Last Crusade, he insisted on doing his own dangerous sequence. When Spielberg hesitated, Ford shrugged. "If I get hurt, at least it's real. That's worth it." That's who Ford is. Unshakable, grounded, always present. There's no showboating between them. Ford doesn't chase acclaim. He doesn't campaign for roles. He just shows up, fully loaded with presence. Spielberg called him authenticity on demand. Whether it's a smirk, a stare, or a punch thrown in a fedora, Ford delivers. Every time. They've made 4 Indiana Jones films together, and if Spielberg ever picks up the director's chair again, there's still only one man he'd want holding the whip. Because for Spielberg, Ford isn't just part of the frame, he is the frame. Number 3. Daniel Day-Lewis. Some actors memorize lines. Daniel Day-Lewis erases himself. When Spielberg cast him as Abraham Lincoln, It wasn't just a performance, it was a possession. Day-Lewis didn't audition, he didn't rehearse in the traditional sense, he transformed. By the time cameras rolled, Lincoln wasn't being played, he was simply present. Spielberg later admitted, "He gave me the gift of time travel. There were moments I forgot we were making a movie." That's not directing, that's witnessing. From the start, Spielberg treated him differently. On set, he didn't call him Daniel, he called him Mr. President. Not for show, but because that's who he was dealing with. Even during breaks, Day-Lewis stayed in character. The crew adjusted. Spielberg adjusted. The entire production bent around the gravity of that performance. And it paid off. Lincoln became one of Spielberg's most critically respected films. Day-Lewis won the Oscar, but Spielberg never bragged. In every interview, he kept coming back to one idea. "I didn't direct him, I just stayed out of his way." That's rare for Spielberg. He's meticulous, controlling, but with Day-Lewis, he stepped back because some storms can't be steered. After Lincoln, they never worked together again. Not out of conflict, but because that kind of cinematic lightning doesn't strike twice. It wasn't a long collaboration, but it was deep. One actor, one role, one film that bent time. Number 4. Leonardo DiCaprio. When Spielberg met Leonardo DiCaprio, the world saw a heartthrob. Spielberg saw a scalpel. Fresh off Titanic, DiCaprio could have coasted on charm. But Spielberg didn't want the smile, he wanted the silence underneath. He cast Leo in Catch Me If You Can, not as a star, but as a broken kid pretending to be untouchable. It worked. DiCaprio's Frank Abagnale Jr. wasn't just a con artist. He was a child running from grief, wearing a man's suit. And Spielberg captured every flicker of doubt in his eyes, without ever spelling it out. He later said, "Leo's got a clock inside him. He never misses a beat. He's not guessing, he's landing." That kind of precision is rare, especially at 28. On set, Leo wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to prove himself. He read scenes like blueprints, asked surgical questions, nailed the emotional rhythm without ever slipping into excess. Spielberg, who usually commands attention, found himself quietly watching. That's the part no one talks about. Leo didn't outshine the film, he tuned to it, like a conductor holding a single perfect note. There were rumors of more, a Howard Hughes film, a courtroom drama, but the timing never aligned. Still, Spielberg never stopped praising him. He called The Revenant devastating, said he wanted to work with Leo again, soon, and when asked what makes DiCaprio special, Spielberg said, "He can carry chaos in his eyes and silence in his voice." One film, no ego, infinite control. Leo didn't just earn Spielberg's respect, he made him pause, and that might be the rarest thing of all. Number 5. Meryl Streep. Steven Spielberg waited nearly 40 years to direct Meryl Streep. When he finally did, it wasn't a career move, it was reverence. She joined the post in 2017, late in the game, with the film rushed into production to reflect a rising political tension. Most actors would have needed time. Meryl didn't. She stepped into the role of Katharine Graham like she'd been living in that skin for decades. Spielberg later said, "Directing Meryl is like conducting a symphony with only one instrument." That wasn't flattery. It was awe. He'd admired her for years from a distance, but nothing prepared him for how subtle her presence would be. No showy monologues, no dramatic flair, just calibrated breath, tension in the jaw, eyes that said more than the dialogue ever could. Behind the camera, Spielberg admitted he felt something he rarely experiences: nerves. She made the room quiet, not because she demanded it, but because her stillness reshaped the air. On set, Spielberg didn't need to give her much. His direction was baked into the script, the rhythm, the lens. Meryl caught it immediately, and carried the film's spine with such restraint that even he was surprised. She earned her 21st Oscar nomination, but that wasn't the part that mattered. Spielberg called her performance a masterclass in internal power. Then he said something he rarely says about anyone. Meryl doesn't need the room, Meryl is the room. One collaboration, one role, and a level of respect most actors never reach, even after a lifetime. It didn't take multiple films. It only took one perfect moment. Number 6. Robin Williams. Robin Williams didn't just play Peter Pan. He became Spielberg's rescue line. When they worked together on Hook, the production was spiraling. Bloated budget, studio pressure. Spielberg, normally precise in control, felt lost in the chaos. And Robin noticed. He didn't ask questions. He didn't make a scene. He just picked up the phone. Every night after shooting, Robin would call Spielberg, not to talk about the film, but to make him laugh. "He'd do 15 minutes of improv over the phone just to lift my mood," Spielberg said. That wasn't a performance, that was presence. Hook may not be Spielberg's most celebrated film, but the experience changed him. Robin gave Peter Pan an adult ache, the weight of forgotten joy, the pain of time slipping away. He took a fantasy and filled it with regret. Spielberg didn't expect that. He let it happen, and he never forgot it. Behind the camera, Robin was chaos in the best way. He improvised entire scenes, pushed the tone into places Spielberg hadn't planned, but instead of resisting, Spielberg leaned in. He trusted the storm. After Hook, they never worked together again on film, but their friendship lasted decades. When Robin passed, Spielberg delayed production on Schindler's List to grieve. He later said, "Robin was the lightning in the bottle, and when he left, the room just dimmed." That's the thing. Robin wasn't Spielberg's most polished collaborator, but he was the most alive, and sometimes that's what matters most. Number 7. Mark Rylance. Mark Rylance didn't explode into Spielberg's world. He drifted in like smoke. No flash, no force, just presence. When Spielberg cast him in Bridge of Spies, most audiences didn't know his name, but Spielberg did. And what he saw wasn't a scene stealer, it was someone who could make silence feel sacred. From their first collaboration, Rylance brought something Spielberg wasn't used to: slowness, stillness, a kind of quiet control that reshaped how Spielberg framed emotion. He once said, "Mark changes the air in the room. You don't direct him, you just follow him." That's rare praise from someone who built a career on control. In Bridge of Spies, Rylance barely raised his voice. His character, Rudolf Abel, was a captured Soviet spy, calm in the face of chaos. Spielberg gave him the space to breathe, and Rylance returned the favor by winning an Oscar. But Spielberg wasn't done. He brought Rylance back for the BFG, then again for Ready Player One. Very different films, very different tones. But the constant was trust. Spielberg knew Rylance didn't need direction, he needed room. And what Rylance gave in return was something most actors can't touch: invisibility. Not in a forgettable way, but in a way that makes the story feel untouched by performance. He's not loud, he's not marketable, but Spielberg keeps calling him back, because sometimes the most powerful actor in the frame is the one who disappears inside it. And Rylance, he makes disappearing look easy. Number 8. Richard Dreyfuss. Before the Oscars, before the blockbusters, there was Dreyfuss. In the 1970s, Spielberg was still the new kid with a camera, and Richard Dreyfuss was the actor who helped him prove he belonged. Their first collaboration, Jaws, wasn't just a hit, it was a war zone. Mechanical sharks failed, schedules collapsed, but Dreyfuss stayed sharp, funny, unpredictable. He brought electricity into a film that was constantly short-circuiting. Spielberg later said, "Richard gave the movie rhythm, he made the tension human." But it didn't stop there. In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Dreyfuss didn't just play a man obsessed, he was obsession. Spielberg didn't want a calm everyman, he wanted someone who could unravel on screen with total sincerity. Dreyfuss delivered. They worked together again on Always, a quieter film that showed the same emotional rawness. But by then, something had changed. Spielberg was bigger, so was Dreyfuss. And their creative chemistry started to cool. Still, Spielberg never dismissed him. He called Dreyfuss one of the first actors who made my ideas feel real. That's not nostalgia, that's foundation. Because without Dreyfuss, there's no early Spielberg. No proof that his characters could feel lived in, no evidence that his sci-fi could bleed, no reassurance that human faces could compete with spectacle. They haven't worked together in decades. but Spielberg still talks about those years like they were lightning in a bottle. And Dreyfus, he was the first to hold the charge. Number 9. Liam Neeson. Before the action roles, before the meme voice, there was Schindler's List. When Spielberg cast Liam Neeson as Oscar Schindler, it wasn't about star power, it was about gravity. Neeson wasn't a household name, but Spielberg saw something in his stillness, a weight, a contradiction, the ability to play a man both heroic and broken, sometimes in the same breath. He later said, "Liam made silence louder than any speech I could have written." That's what Schindler's List needed, restraint, not dramatics. On set, Neeson barely spoke unless it was in character. He didn't push the emotion, he buried it. And somehow, that made it even harder to watch. Spielberg's camera lingered on his face, not because it was expressive, but because it wasn't. It left room for the viewer to feel everything. The film became a landmark in Spielberg's career. It won Best Picture. It redefined Neeson's image. But behind the awards and accolades, something more personal happened. Spielberg changed. He later admitted that making Schindler's List was the most emotionally taxing experience of his life. And Neeson, quiet and unshakable, became the emotional anchor behind the camera as well as in front of it. They never collaborated again. But Spielberg never stopped talking about that performance. Because it wasn't just acting, it was something deeper, something unspoken. Neeson didn't play a role. He carried a weight Spielberg didn't have words for, and still doesn't. Some actors give a great performance. Liam Neeson gave Spielberg his most human film. Number 10. Ben Kingsley. Ben Kingsley doesn't act like he's holding back. He acts like he's already seen everything, and is deciding what not to say. In Schindler's List, he played Itzhak Stern, the quiet accountant who became Schindler's moral mirror. The role didn't demand speeches or spotlight, it demanded presence, internal weight, and Kingsley carried it like it was carved into his bones. Spielberg later said, "Ben doesn't perform emotion, he channels consequence." That's why Stern mattered. He wasn't just Schindler's assistant, he was the emotional barometer of the film. The tension in his silence, the calculation in his eyes, the rare, quiet fury that made every scene feel like a moral test. And off camera, Kingsley brought the same intensity. He reportedly stayed emotionally locked in between takes, not method acting exactly but something close. He didn't joke on set, he didn't break character. Spielberg respected that. He didn't treat it as difficult, he treated it as sacred. What makes Kingsley unforgettable isn't volume, it's the stillness he carries like a weapon. In a film filled with unimaginable chaos, he was the steady beat underneath it all. Spielberg never used him again, but that wasn't a sign of disconnection. It was proof that some roles only happen once, and when they land, they don't need to repeat. Kingsley gave Schindler's List its quiet edge, not the kind you notice at first, the kind that builds in your chest and stays long after the screen fades to black. Some actors speak truth. Kingsley made it feel like truth was sitting right in front of you, quietly waiting for you to catch up. Number 11. Pete Postlethwaite. Spielberg once said, without hesitation, Pete Postlethwaite is the best actor in the world. Not most famous, not most awarded, just the best. And if you've seen The Lost World, Jurassic Park, you know why. Postlethwaite played Roland Tembo, a big game hunter brought in to tame chaos. But what he delivered wasn't just toughness, it was precision, presence. A man hardened by violence, yet haunted by something deeper. In a film packed with dinosaurs, CGI, and mayhem, it was Pete's quiet stare that stole the frame. He brought gravity to scenes that could have been cartoonish. He spoke with the weight of a character who'd lived 100 lives off-screen, and Spielberg gave him space to do it. Unlike other actors chasing spotlight, Postlethwaite didn't care about ego. He refused a trailer. He said he didn't need anything fancy, just good writing and a reason to care. That attitude? Spielberg loved it. He said Pete worked like a surgeon, but hit like a storm. Off-set, he was humble, barely visible. But when the camera rolled, something shifted. He became inevitable, the kind of actor who didn't need a lead role to dominate a story. Spielberg never used him again, but he didn't need to. One film, a handful of scenes, and the legend was sealed. Postlethwaite passed in 2011. Spielberg didn't release a statement. He didn't post a tribute. He didn't have to. That quote, "the best in the world," wasn't said in memoriam. It was said when Pete was alive, working, unrecognized by most, and Spielberg meant every word. Number 12. Christian Bale. He was 13, unknown, barely trained, and Spielberg handed him an entire film. Empire of the Sun wasn't a light story, it was brutal, heavy, a war epic seen through the eyes of a boy torn from everything he knows. Spielberg could have cast a seasoned child actor, someone safe, but instead he chose Christian Bale. What he got shocked everyone. Bale didn't just cry on cue, he broke, he collapsed. Then he put himself back together, again and again, scene after scene. Spielberg later said, he had the emotional control of a 40-year-old actor trapped in a boy's body. On set, Bale didn't need coaching. He absorbed blocking like instinct. He took emotional notes like they were muscle memory. And despite being a kid surrounded by veteran talent, Spielberg let him lead. Empire of the Sun didn't become a box office smash, but Spielberg didn't care. What he remembered was Bale's total surrender to the moment. No ego, no fear, just raw power wrapped in childlike fragility. They never worked together again, not because Bale faded, but because he ascended into darker roles, sharper films. But Spielberg has always spoken of him with a quiet awe, like he saw something no one else was ready for at the time, and honestly, he probably did. Christian Bale didn't build trust over time, he earned it all in one performance, one that made Spielberg see childhood not as innocence, but as war. And maybe that's why Bale still lingers in Spielberg's memory, because sometimes the actor who shocks you the most is the one you never expected to carry the whole story. Spielberg never brags about favorites. He speaks in moments, in silences, in the weight of a scene that still echoes years later. Some of these actors he worked with once, others for decades. But each one left a mark, not just on film, but on Spielberg himself. They gave him trust, precision, stillness, chaos. And in return, he gave them something even rarer, legacy. Their names may not be carved into every frame, but they're etched into the way Spielberg tells stories, breath by breath, shot by shot. So, which one stayed with you the most? Let me know in the comments, and if you liked the video, hit subscribe and drop a like. It really helps more stories like this get told. Want early access to upcoming videos, exclusive breakdowns, and channel-only perks? Become a member today. The next one's coming fast.